Today is going to be a busy day.
With the delays that have happened to the van, I'm feeling a little bit gutted that we can't go on more adventures. So we've decided to make some modifications to Morty the Mercedes. That's going to all start with our very own DIY slide-out kitchen. Remember, I've never used tools before, I've never built something like this before, so what could possibly go wrong?
What's the actual plan for today? This. You can barely see me. A few weeks ago, we bought a set of tools. Today, we're finally opening them up. So I don't remember the exact price, but the kit came in at about 500-ish pounds.
Come on, guys.
Pocket holes.
And here you get a first glimpse into the sophisticated drawing that I did in my crazy idea book. I went quickly back to the Mercedes to double check all my measurements and make sure that I hadn't made any mistakes. And then I started getting ready to make my first ever cut with a circular saw.
This thing, potentially terrifying.
They say you always remember your first time, and this was no different. I went very slow on this first cut, and this footage has actually been sped up 4 times just to try and make it seem faster.
But at least now I have a piece of wood that I can move.
Look at the state of those cuts. That's not professional. As I get on with working out the pieces that I need for the frame and measuring those out on the piece of wood, I realise that my simple drawings probably aren't going to help me at this stage.
Note to self, something holding the wood up would be useful.
At this point I'm starting to feel a little bit more confident with a circular saw, so I'm cracking on with the cuts that we need.
We have 3 pieces of wood.
Now all we need is a base, and that will make the frame. Now bearing in mind this is the first time that I've tried to build something like this, I'm actually pretty happy with it. The 4 pieces come together, they all fit, and if you can imagine, that front is going to be where a drawer will pull out of.
Rather annoyingly, got pieces of wood cut, but all the pocket hole screws that we bought need a square bit, and I don't have a square bit. I'm trying to work out how I build the inset top shelf, because it's not going on top, it's going just within, so there's a little lip, which means that the fridge won't move around. My theory is the only way to get better is to keep trying.
They say practice makes perfect, but looking at some of these cuts, I think we need a hell of a lot more practice. I measured and cut the shelf insert, but it's not quite right.
I made a mistake. I measured based on the length of the whole thing again, without taking into consideration the inside.
A few moments later.
Moment of truth. I figured out what the internal piece would need to be, and so I'm going to try and cut those pieces now.
Also known as a drawer, I measured and cut what I needed for the pull-out section of this build.
Motherfucker.
I said I was getting more confident with a circular saw, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm getting any better with it.
So, this is the frame, and the frame is pretty simple, but in theory, this is the bulk of all the construction that we've done. Not actually a huge amount. Day 2. Technically it's like 3 days later because the weather has been awful.
The square bit arrived, and with that I started drilling all the pocket holes and fixing together the frame with the pocket screws. I started getting the hang of it, but to be honest, just with the sheer number of these things that I was trying to put in, this was taking me a lot longer than I was expecting. But finally we had an assembled frame. Not perfect, but assembled. And by not perfect, I mean some of the screws had come through. I was on a bit of a roll at this point, so I continued and I managed to assemble the drawer. But I did notice that the plywood had warped significantly, so it did make this a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Not perfect, but seems pretty solid.
And then I thought, it might be about time we try and put the drawer inside the frame. And thank God, it fit. Now it's time to get rid of some of those little imperfections. And by imperfections I mean the screws that came straight through the bottom. That's better. Now just a quick sand to give everything a smooth finish, and we can move on to the drawer runners. Now this is where things get exciting. I've never fitted these sort of things, and these are special, expensive, heavy-duty drawer runners. So let's see how these go together.
In theory, this should still fit in between the two hinges.
And by hinges, I mean drawer runners, of course. The drawer fit, so I fixed it to the runners. And it's not properly smooth, but it's not too bad. Now I'm checking to make sure that this is level because I'm fixing the batons inside the frame for the lid to sit on top of. And with the lid fitting, it's time for one last test. Look at that smooth-ish motion.
Watching you get down with your whole damn crew. Everybody feel it, come around with the rhythm. It's a sound every round when we give it to you.
It's day 3, and it's time to finish this thing.
Sometimes you have to take a step back to take a step forward.
Shelf is out.
So now I'm trying to measure and mark up all the internal space for inside the drawer and also where the controls are going to be for the gas. I've then moved on to scribing the front of the drawer so that I can understand where the drawer runner handles are going to go, and I've made myself like a little jig made out of cardboard which I can then move onto the wood and mark out where I'm going to cut out. And just like that, our drawer now has a little cutout for the controls. After a little sanding and finishing, I then moved on to securing the batten onto the lid so that we could hold the fridge in place.
Okay, next step. Let's put some carpet.
Now, if like me you've never done anything like this before, I highly recommend practicing beforehand. I didn't, but after a few attempts I managed to get something that resembled something decent. I won't lie, I don't particularly enjoy the carpeting. One more check of the internal pieces all together, and then it's back to carpeting the storage lid, my least favourite job. Now that the drawer is more or less complete, I'm fitting it back into the frame, hopefully for the last time. Then it's onto the front of the drawer, which again I'm just double checking fits, and then we're going to carpet it. I'm really not enjoying the carpeting, but I do think I'm getting slightly better. With the front of the drawer fixed in now, just time to give it a quick hoover and get rid of any leftover sawdust. I really feel like we're nearly there as I'm starting to paint the unit. I start by using a grey primer, and then we follow up with a gloss black on the outside, which should help it to blend into the car's boot. And just like that, we have a DIY slide-out kitchen ready to be fitted into the car. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. But for now,
The next morning.
after a great walk with Bob, it was finally time to test the slide-out kitchen. And I'm feeling pretty chuffed with it.